Blocks are meant to hold logic, and as proper programmers, we should probably write some tests to verify whether or not that logic is correct. If you follow test-driven development, writing tests is even more crucial. But there's one problem. Testing blocks requires a lot of boilerplate. The Bloc Test package sets out to solve this issue by providing abstractions even for testing, as if it wasn't enough that block is itself an abstraction for pure streams. So from now on, there's gonna be no more dealing with classic streams even inside your test files. Hello, welcome to Reso Coder, where you are getting prepared for real app development so that you will get freelance clients or a job and be confident about the apps you build. So subscribe and hit the bell to join us on our quest for becoming sought after developers. Also, if you want to meet up with the Flutter community this January in Warsaw, check out fluttereurope.dev or also go to the link in the video description. A while ago, I created a tutorial showcasing how to use Bloc version 1.0.0. Now the Bloc library is actually at the version 2.1.1, but I've taken that app, done some minor fixes in order for it to work even with the newer version of Flutter Bloc. And if you haven't watched that tutorial yet, definitely check it out from the card in the corner. But basically what we have here, and what's also a starter project, which you can get from the link in the video description, we have a weather search app where we can input a city, and we have basically 50% probability that we are going to get an error. And we did get an error because the device is supposedly not online now. But if we search for that city again, so again London, we may finally get the actual weather. And shortly after some time, we arrived at the display page where the temperature is displayed and also the name of the city is displayed, and also we can see the details for that city. And detailed weather simply means that in addition to degrees Celsius, there are also going to be degrees Fahrenheit. So be sure to check out the written tutorial from the link in the description, where apart from this starter project, you can also find all of the code written in this video, links to the libraries, and overall go through this lesson at your own pace. So we are interested only in the block, which is right over here, also present in the starter project, as I have already mentioned. And in this tutorial about Bloc Test package, we're actually gonna only test this part for when the get weather event arrives in the block, because there are two types of events: get weather, which is that one which shows only Celsius, and then there is the get detailed weather, which shows also Fahrenheit. We are not interested in this, so we're gonna be testing only the first part of map event to state. So basically we're gonna test that it should yield weather loading state, and then it should load either weather loaded state with the weather inside of it if everything goes successfully, or when there is some kind of an exception happening, it should output weather error state. So this is what we are going to test. First, in the absolute classic way, as you were probably testing all along if you were testing blocks, for example, as we were testing in the Clean Architecture Test-Driven Development tutorial series, which you can check out from the card in the corner. We were testing blocks the old way all along. And then we are also going to take a look at two newer ways, which are absolutely amazing, and those come together with the Bloc Test package. So first up, we obviously need to absolutely add the Bloc Test package over to our project. So under dev dependencies, we are going to add this, which is Bloc Test, currently at version 2.2.2. Be sure to use the same version as I'm using now to prevent any unexpected changes in the future from confusing you. And also you can get all of this from the written tutorial. So once we save that, Bloc Test will be downloaded over to our project and we can begin writing tests for the block. First up, we actually need to create the test file. We can even remove this widget test, which we do not need to worry about. And we are going to create new file, weatherblocktest.dart. We are going to provide the basic test scaffolding. I actually have a nifty little code snippet over here, T scaffold. So we import Makito, Flutter test. And if we take a look, really quickly, this block is dependent on weather repository, which basically just has two simple methods which fake fetching weather from an API. It actually just generates some random weather data over here, and it has a possibility to also throw network error. That's not really important. We are just going to be testing with this fetch weather method. And also, if you want to study this code, really check out the full project, which is available from the link in the video description from the written tutorial, which you can get at resocoder.com. So let's commence writing the test file. We are first going to need to mock the weather repository. So class mock weather repository. And it's going to extend mock. And also it will implement weather repository. And you may have noticed that we are using Mockito over here, but we have not added it as a dependency, right? We have just Flutter test and Bloc Test. So some of you may already know what's happening. Mockito is already a dependency for the Bloc Test. So depending on Bloc Test also automatically adds Mockito. So that's why we do not need to add it manually, but we can still use it as a regular package from our app or even from the tests. So now once we have this mock weather repository class, we're going to create an instance or a variable where we will hold the instance inside main. So mock weather repository, and let's just assign it to be equal to new mock instance in setup. And now we are getting to the interesting stuff, which is the group for testing the get weather event. And we're going to first, as I promised, take a look at the old way of doing things, as you were doing that all along probably, because just a while ago the block test package was not available, so this was the only way to test your blocks. But now there are actually better ways, but let's appreciate how they are better by first looking at this old way. So we're going to first mock that when the mock weather repository's fetch weather method is called with any name passed inside of it, we are going to answer, because that's an asynchronous call, and we are going to answer asynchronously with some sort of a weather. So we can, for example, have a weather, which is a simple model class, and a weather can hold city name. So let's name it London. And then also weather can hold temperature Celsius. So let's do something like 7, because it's already December almost when I'm recording this. So in London it's probably quite cold. And because we are just calling fetch weather and not fetch weather detailed, we are actually going to leave the temperature Fahrenheit empty, and that's not going to cause any problems. So now we are returning weather from here, and we can proceed to actually test the block. We are first going to create an instance of the block which we want to test. So that's our weather block. And we're going to pass in the mock weather repository, obviously, because we have just mocked it. So we need to pass it in also in order to use this mocked instance of the repository. And now we want to add an event to the block. So as usual, we would do this even from the UI. And now we are basically faking the UI events from the test file. So we are going to add the get weather event and pass in a city name London. And now this is an important part, the way that you check for a proper output from a block. The usual way is by expecting later. And here the actual will be block, because block from the version 1.0.0 implements stream. And now this block should emit in order, or emits in order. And the order of the states emitted will be weather initial. Then of course weather loading, because if we take a look, it immediately outputs weather loading, and then we're going to say weather loaded. So weather loading, and then weather loaded with the weather passed in there. So let's just collapse the sidebar, and we're going to pass in the same precise weather as we are outputting from the mock weather repository. So we're just going to cut that out and put it into final weather without capital. And it's going to be equal to this weather. And now we're going to output weather even from the mock weather repository. And also it's going to be present this same instance inside the state. All right. And I have just noticed that I didn't put this into a test method. So let's correct it right now. Of course, we want to create a test. Put all of this over here except for the weather. And now we're going to name this test something like old way emits weather loading and weather loaded when successful. So this is how you would test your blocks the old way. And let's now quickly run all of the tests. And we are going to see that this test should indeed pass. And it does. So that's awesome. Now we are going to copy this test and we are going to transform it 2 times into more and more terse and manageable thing. So let's just copy this test method. And now we are actually going to start using the Bloc Test package because, as I said, this has nothing to do with Bloc Test. This is the old way of doing things. Now we're not going to immediately hop into the best way of doing things, in my opinion, but we are going to still use Bloc Test to simplify things for us, but it's still not going to be as terse as it can be. So we're going to call this newer way, but long-winded. And why is it still long-winded? Well, the only thing which we are going to replace now is that instead of expect later, we are going to say emits exactly. And now we can just specify the block. And actually, whereas expect later can take in anything here, but basically it should be a stream, emits exactly can only take in a block. So emits exactly is absolutely just geared towards the block and nothing else. And because of that, we do not need to say, again, another matcher emits in order and all of that. We can just say emits exactly and then pass in the states without any kind of a matcher. So just this array, we're going to pop it in there and we're good to go now. So we can get rid of this expect later. And this is the second way of how you can test your blocks. However, there is a third way, which is much, much more terse. But even now, if we take a look at this and run this code, it's still going to pass. And also, you do not need to just test for the actual instances over here. For example, instead of checking for an actual instance of weather initial, you can also check for whether or not it's just of a certain type. So for example, if we did not want to test if weather loaded has the proper weather inside of it, we could just do something like is a matcher, which comes from the package called type matcher, I guess. And we can just test if the last state is a weather loaded state. And now we do not need to worry about which kind of a weather is present inside of that state. So you can do even something like this with this emits exactly assertion. But let's just make it back into testing for the actual weather. And now the last test, which we are going to write for the same functionality, is going to be a test using Bloc Test. So actually, I don't know why I just copied this, because I cannot even copy it because it's so different the way that you write a Bloc Test, because Bloc Test takes in a description. So we're again going to say emits weather loading and weather loaded when successful. That stays the same, but now everything is different. We have 3 sub-methods which we can populate: build, and I expect that this is going to at some point change to create, so keep that in mind. If you are not using the same version of Bloc Test, this may be renamed to create instead of build, just like the build method from the UI is now renamed to be create, as you can see right over here in the block provider. So just keep this in mind. And this build for now, which is called build, inside of here, we are going to want to return the block and also initiate any mocks. So we're going to copy the mock initiation for the weather repository, paste it into build. We're going to return this block. So return weather block with the mock weather repository passed in. So that's it for build. Now we have two more submethods, act. You can have this act or not, depending on whether or not you want to add an event, because over here inside act, you should only be adding events to the block. So you will receive an instance of the block, and over here you can say block.add. For some reason, IntelliSense doesn't want to cooperate. It still thinks that this is dynamic, but whatever. We can still add get weather for London. All right. And the last thing over here is expect. This is, as usual, going to be an iterable. So we can just copy this, our trusted iterable here, which contains weather initial, weather loading, and weather loaded. So now when we run this, it's going to again pass, but it's written in a completely terse and much more readable way, because you have block test where you build the block and initiate any mocks which go together with the block. And then you have act, which obviously you should do something with the block, and the only thing which you can do with the block is to add an event. And then you have expect, which speaks for itself. So really check out the written tutorial if you want to go over this once more, but you can see that the last way of writing block tests is really the most terse, and in my opinion, the most readable way. So, because we want to also test the whole case where the get weather event arrives inside the block, we also need to test for the option that a network error is thrown, in which case the block should output weather error. So let's test for that right now. We are going to test for it in the last most terse way with block test. So let's just copy this test below. It should output weather error when unsuccessful, and here after calling fetch weather on the repository, we should then throw, and we're going to throw the network error, instantiate that, and the last state should not be weather loaded, but weather error with the message which is present inside the block. So couldn't fetch weather is the device online. So let's paste that message over here. And now we're good to go even with this test. Once we run all of the tests, everything should still be passing, and that's correct. So now you know how to use block test, but there is another awesome addition which I want to show you, which comes together with the block test package. Whenever you are unit testing a block which depends on another block, there is also a bunch of boilerplate which would benefit from having some kind of simplification. And that's precisely why the block test library also comes with a nifty mock block. That's right, you can mock blocks very easily with block test. So let's take a look at it now, even though we have just one block, so we have no dependencies in between multiple blocks, but still something like that can happen. So I want to show you how to do that. Because of that, I'm just going to fabricate an example, and we're just going to write a test. So we're going to write a new test file. Let's call it like dependency between blocks example test .dart. Wow, that's a long name. But anyway, here we can just copy whatever we already have inside the previous weather block test, just so we have all of the dependencies readily available to us. And now we want to actually mock our weather block, and just imagine that this weather block is a dependency of another block. Usually you would have, for example, authentication block, and that would be a dependency of multiple other blocks because usually authentication is needed in multiple places throughout the app. So think about something like that. Now this is just a silly example to prove the point. So we're going to mock our weather block. Create void main for testing as usual. And above it, we're going to create a class mock weather block, which will extend mock block, which will have weather event and weather state. And also this mock weather block should obviously implement our weather block. And once we have that, we can continue in the main method where we are going to populate an instance of mock weather block from the setup method. So inside here, inside setup, we're going to set mock weather block to be equal to a new instance of mock weather block. And now with this kind of a setup, mocking the states which are being outputted from this block is very, very easy. All we need to do is to create a test method, say something like example mocked block test. And to tell the mock block which states it should output, we're going to use when listen, which comes from the block test package. So when listen on the mock weather block, it should always output some sort of stream. And here you can construct a stream in whichever way you like, but probably, even as it writes even here inside the documentation, you are gonna want to construct the stream from an iterable because that's the easiest option. So we're going to say stream from iterable, and we're just going to provide a bunch of elements. So for example, let's just say weather initial and also weather loading. And that's it. So now we can simply listen to this mock blocks stream as usual with expect later. And we expect that the mock weather blocks stream is going to emit in order. Not in any order, although that would work too, but we want to keep the precise order here. And we're going to say that it should be, again, weather initial, just like above. So let's just copy this list of states, and this should be the output from the mocked block. And of course, it's going to work, right? So let's do just that. Let's run all of the tests and see if it works. So surely here, dependency between blocks, this test works. And if we change the mock block to output one more initial state, right? Do something like that. Now when we run this test, it's not going to pass because there is one additional state and surely it does not pass. So that's awesome. When we delete this weather initial duplicate from the mocked block, it's again going to pass just fine. Cool. To go through this tutorial at your own pace once again and to get all of the code, check out the written tutorial available from the link in the description. And if you are serious about becoming a great Flutter developer who can build real apps for clients or at a job, go to flutter.education, link is also in the description, to get the top curated Flutter news and resources aimed at improving your app development career. Over there you can also subscribe to my mailing list to get the best Flutter resources delivered weekly right into your inbox. So in this tutorial you learned how to use the Bloc Test package. It's an amazing way to simplify the test writing process when you are doing even test-driven development with blocks. This would be highly beneficial to our clean architecture test-driven development series. It's really a sad thing that back then this package was not available, but now it is. So use it, really use it when you are testing with blocks because it's going to save you so much time and it's also going to make the tests more readable. And if you do not want to miss more tutorials like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel and also join the notification squad by hitting the bell button to make sure you grow your Flutter skills, because here on ResoCoder, I am determined to provide you with the best tutorials and resources so that you will become a sought-after Flutter developer. If this video helped you with the Bloc Test package and overall with testing your blocks, give this video a like and also share it with our developers who will surely benefit from this too. Leave a comment if you have anything to say, and see you in the next video.